Section 4.2 is really taking a look at how do we get information from our journal to our ledger. Because as of right now, all of our information is saved only in the journal, and that makes it very difficult if a customer calls in and needs to know how much they owe, or if we need to determine how much we owe a business, or if we want to make a decision about how well our sales are doing because we don't have one spot to go to that would give us all of our sales information. So what we're doing in Section 4-2 is we're taking a look at getting our information from our journal and putting it into a ledger. Now, one of our vocabulary words that we have in this chapter is called a general ledger. A general ledger is a group of ledgers put together to create a financial statement. And we haven't learned about financial statements, but we're going to be creating them. You've learned about a financial statement in last hour, and so has Sierra, okay? So in personal finance, they're doing some financial statements right now. You just did it last hour. Like 2 days in a row you did it. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at our instructions for Work Together 4-2 is we have a completed journal and general ledger accounts are given, and you get to work with me, and I'm going to guide you through the following examples. Leonard Witowski owns a service business that uses the following accounts. You'll notice that we have account titles and account numbers with them to go through and give you a heads up on what their account numbers are. Don't forget that the account numbers clue you into the account classifications. Okay? So if you see something that starts with a 3, you should know automatically that it's owner's equity. If it starts with a 1, it's an asset. So account numbers clue you in. The other thing it will tell you is if you know the account number, you then know the normal balance. If it's 1, it's an asset, debit, normal balance. If I have an account number that starts with a 2, should it ever have a debit normal balance? No, because it's a liability. Don's is never going to owe me money. In our happy little accounting land, that never happens. Okay, and we like to keep things simple to start with. So we're going to go through our instructions. Truly read. Post the separate amounts of each line of the journal that need to be posted individually. So let's take a look at our journal here. I'm going to spend a little time talking about what we're doing before we physically get in there. When I look at the journal, last chapter we took a test on this journal. We have general account columns and special account columns. Okay? General account columns are these two columns right here, general debit and general credit. Okay? They're called general because they don't have an account title on the top of them. These columns here, what are they called? Say it again. Special. And why are they so special? They're used a lot. And what's at the very top of them? An account title, right? So there's cash and there's sales. If I had a business that used postage expense a lot, should I create a journal that had its own column for postage expense? Yes. Marissa, eyes up here. Not on your phone. Okay. So we want to make sure that when we use a journal for a business, we have special columns that are going to make our life easier. All businesses use cash a lot, so that makes sense. And if you're in business, you should have sales. Can anyone think of a business that would not have sales? Nonprofit. Oh, that's worth a starburst right there. Because nonprofits don't sell anything. They do things for their people, but they still have money coming in, though, right? And how do they get money coming in? Donations. So their form instead of sales would be donations. So they would be a business that would not have a sales. So what we are really doing is we're taking a look at getting our information from our journal that has information for the whole month about all transactions to a spot that I can look for each individual account and make some decisions. Because we do all of this book work for a business so that way we can decide, is our business being profitable? Are we making good decisions? Or should we change something? Because all businesses, even nonprofits, need to at least break even, if not make money. Does that make sense? Nonprofits want to make a little bit of money because they want to grow and get better and do more things. They can't do that unless they at least cover their expenses and have additional funds. So when we look at a ledger down here, you will see right here it says Select General Ledger, and from the drop-down menu we have a series of ledger accounts. So I'm just going to open up prepaid insurance to look at it. We don't need to do anything there. I'm still talking up here. Yesterday, we had to go through and open an account. To open an account, all we needed to do was put our account title on the left-hand side and put our account number on the right-hand side. That's opening an account. Wasn't too difficult, right? What we're going to do with that today, though, is we're going to look at our journal, and we're going to take information from our journal and put it into our ledger. So I would go through and I would look at a transaction. Actually, I'm going to switch. I'm going to do Leonard Witowski Capital. When I look at line 1 up here on my journal, moving across left to right in line number 1, I always am going by the line numbers here on the left-hand side, not the date, because I wouldn't say date because there could be multiple transactions with the same date. Does that make sense? But if I say line number, there's only that one line number. So on line number 1 of my journal, going across, I can see what goes right here but our account title. Any account title here tells you that's going to be what we use here in our general ledger. Does that make sense? So when I move across here on line 1, what's an account title but Leonard Witowski Capital? So that tells me down here on my ledger, open up Leonard Witowski Capital. Then I move across more, and I am only looking in my general debit and credit columns. I'm ignoring my special columns. I'm going to deal with special columns only at the end of the month for posting. Okay. What we're doing is called posting, and it takes information from one spot and we're putting it in another. Okay, so that's really what we're doing. We're going to have separate records. So I'm going to look here. Leonard Witowski Capital has a credit here for $5,000. When we post, we don't make debits and credits equal anymore. We only make debits and credits equal when we journalize, when we affect two accounts. Does that make sense? All we're doing now is taking this $5,000, putting it in an account for Leonard Witowski Capital, and we're going to be going through and calculating the balance. Now, when I look at my ledger account here, moving across, I have the date and I have an item column. I'm going to tell you 98% of the time this item column is going to be left blank. We're not going to do anything with this. A few times, but not very often. Then we have this column here called post reference. That looks a little familiar, doesn't it? Okay. Post reference, that refers to where did you get this information from. Okay, so we'll put something in there. But then I have two columns here for debit and credit. And then I have another column here for debit and credit. But what's the difference on this one? Balance. So what we do here is we take our information from our ledger, $5,000 credit, and we put it here in this first column here dealing with debit and credit, because this is the amount of the transaction that you're recording, and this is going to be the balance of the account. Now, we know that our account numbers clue us into our classification. This starts with a 3, so therefore it's owner's equity, and it's the capital account, so therefore its normal balance should be credit. You now know that this balance should never be debit. The other thing that I'm going to tell you is you can never have a negative balance. So you can't have a negative debit balance. Instead of a negative debit balance, it would be a credit balance. Does that make sense? So it's either a debit or a credit balance. You don't have a negative in a column. But you also should look at it and realize if I put this in there and it's going to give me a debit balance for capital, something's not right. Maybe I wrote it wrong incorrectly here, or maybe I did it wrong here. That could be the case. So you just want to watch out for that. The balance column truly is where I go through and look to see what is the balance of this one account. Okay? Dylan's a customer of mine under accounts receivable. He calls me up. I open up his ledger account, and what can I see? All of the transactions that Dylan has done with my business. Does that help me to help my customer? I can look back and say, oh, in August, we did sales on an account of $300, but you paid us that in September, but then you had another one in October, so right now you have a balance of $150. So I can see individual amounts of transactions in these columns, but this column always, always, always is going to be what the balance of that one account may be. And it should always match to the normal balance side of the classification, which is why we're still doing T accounts, because we need to know what normal balances are. And I know I have like 3 days worth of T accounts that I have to grade. So you will get them back on Monday because I won't be here tomorrow. Okay. We're good to go? We got that part so far? We're ready to try some? Stay with me because there's going to be some parts on here that I want to explain why. The first thing that I want to tell you is it's important that you do it the way I show you, the procedure. What I oftentimes see students do, even on your journal, is they go through and fill in all the dates first. That's not the right way of doing it. You really want to work line by line by line on your way down from the journal. Okay. The same thing is going to hold true when you post. You're going to start on your first line, do what the information tells you, and then move to the second line. And I will explain why when we get to this point. Okay. So the first one here, we have Leonard Witowski Capital. Down here, is there a month on here? So the first thing I have to do is get my month on there, and that's going to be March. And then the date of the transaction is going to be March 1st. Now, when I hit enter, we completely skip over post-reference, which is totally fine because we don't have to do anything with that. Or excuse me, I skip over item column to get in post-reference. The post-reference stands for where did we get this information? And where are we getting this information for journalizing? Or for posting, I'm saying the wrong words. What is this? Journal. What page? 1. So what goes right here is going to be 1. Because if I affect this from page 2 next time, I would be able to see 2. Does that tell us where to go to find it? So that's what's going to go there. It's just going to be the page number of the journal. Now, Leonard Witowski Capital, is he being debited or being credited? Credit. So I take this credit and I put it right here. I'm not making debits and credits equal right now. I'm just taking it and getting the new balance for this one account. So I'm going to skip over and put a $5,000 in here for credit. Please note, there are columns here that we don't have to put anything in, and that is totally fine. Okay? You don't need to fill everything in. Now, before this transaction, what was the balance of this account? 0. And what did we just do to it? Credited it for $5,000. So if I take 0 and I credit it $5,000, what is my new balance? $5,000 as a credit. Okay? So that's what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do balance credit here of $5,000. Do not put a credit here and a debit there and say, good, I made things balance. That's not the point of what we're doing. Okay? I'm not making debits and credits equal. I'm just taking the information and putting it into my ledger and finding my balance. Bless you. So in the balance column, you always have to look at what the previous balance was and then go through and do math. Now, if I would have had debited this account $50, what would my balance be? And it was 0 to start with. 50 in debit, right? Starting with the 0 balance. Now, if I have a previous balance, let's say that previous balance is a credit, and my next transaction I put on there as a credit. I have 2 credits. What should I do, add or subtract? Add. If they are the same, you're going to add. If I had a credit balance and I needed to debit it, I would have to subtract, and the balance would be whatever side is bigger. So if I had a credit balance of $500 and I debited it for $250, I now have a debit balance of credit balance of $250. I said it wrong. So if you have 2 credits, you add. If you have 2 debits, you add. But if you have a debit and a credit, you subtract. Sound good? Now the last step that we do when we post is I have to take this account number right here, 310, and that goes right here because that tells us that we went through and put this in our ledger in account number 310. The air turned on. Can you hear it rattling now? It's not cold. It's cooler. But it's always cool when you hang out with me. Oh, I'm leaving that on the video. That's totally staying in there. People in the rest of the world, if they watch it, they're going to be like, whatever, Mrs. Grassel. Okay, line 2. Line 2. So when I look at line 2 here, going across, the date is the 3rd. What account do I have to open? Prepaid insurance. Bam. Let's find that. Yep, you just click on that X, that ledger will close, and then you just click on prepaid insurance. That one will then open up, and I need to do the date. Is there a month in there yet? No, so I have to fill in March again, and the date is going to be the 3rd. Nothing in the item column. What's my post reference? Why? Because it is page 1. Now, I get to this debit and credit part. Now I got to stop, and where do I need to look again? Up here in my journal, okay? So in my journal, I'm looking at line 2. I'm looking in this general column. What am I doing? Am I debiting or crediting? Debit. So I'm taking this debit of $660 from my general, and I'm going to put it right here for $660. What was my previous balance before I did anything in prepaid insurance? 0. And what did I just do to that account? I debited $660 too. So 0 plus a debit of $660 is going to give me a balance of $660. What's the last thing I do? Take my account number, back up on my journal. Now I'm going to share with you what I see students do, and it's the wrong thing to do. Okay, so eyes up here. I want to explain why. Because they think it's a more efficient way of doing it, but it's not, and let me explain. Kids will go through and they'll look here and they'll say, oh, look, accounts payable, Joshua Supply, and they fill in all of these numbers. Then there's a fire drill and we leave, and you come back in. Where did you leave off? Do you have any idea? Now, if we have a fire drill, we leave, we can't get back into the building until tomorrow and I reset things, which line do we need to post from? Where do we leave off? Right here. We know that we need to post this one. But if you go through and fill in all these numbers here, it doesn't help you to know where you are. All it does is show, yeah, I got this part taken care of. But that's not the right procedure, not the right way to do it. And I always try to explain the reason why you do it that way, because I get you can look really fast and fill in those numbers. But the last step in posting, when you get it into account, is to put the number back up there for you to say, check, yes, I have this line done. If you fill in numbers up top, that doesn't tell you that you have it done where it needs to be. So the reason why that needs to be done in that order. Okay? So now we're on line 3. What accounts am I opening in my ledger? Supplies. Okay? So I have to fill in my month, which is March. The date is the 4th. Post reference is 1. Notice it's all still the same. So supplies, am I debiting or crediting? Debiting for how much? What's my balance? I'm sorry, just didn't hear it. Say it again, Hannah. I love the fact that you said 78 under debit because you knew that your balance could be either side, but it was correct as a debit for that one. The last step is always account number back up on top. So the next one we're going to do is accounts payable Joshua Supply. You guys kind of getting the hang of this so far? So we're going to do March 4th again. Post reference is still 1. Now accounts payable Joshua Supply, this is a transaction we journalized as an M because we purchased supplies on account, is going to be a credit here for 78. So I need to jump down to line number 5 and I jump over and it's a credit of 78. So, Scott, what's my balance going to be? Thank you. Very good. So I'm going to do credit of 78. I'm going to put up there 210 to say, I just posted that. Now, I need to explain to you line 5. This is an eyes up here. Chapter 3, we went through, and when we journalized, I said, if you affect 2 special columns, we put a check mark in the account title. Would you agree? And we put a check mark in the account title because we don't want to leave it blank. If we leave it blank, it looks like we forgot to do something. A check mark indicates, yeah, I know, I took care of it and I did it right. The other thing I said is if you put a check mark in the account title, just know that you put a check mark in this column. And don't worry, I'll spend a whole chapter talking about it. Welcome, we're now talking about it. Why do we have a check mark here? How is this line different than the one above it? It affects two special columns. Is there anything I need to post right now? No. So when we journalize it, we put a check mark there to say, yeah, when we get to this, we can skip right over it and we don't have to post it. What we're doing right now is called posting each line individually. We're starting at the top of our journal and we work our way down and we post each account individually. When we get to the end of the month, I'm going to go through and post my totals right here because it is better information for my business to know that March's sales were 838 versus in my ledger that I had sales on the 8th and I had sales on the 9th. Would you agree? Business wants to know March 838. If I want to know the individual amounts, I would go back and look at my journal. But you're going to make decisions on what happens in the month. So that is why we're going to post these totals there. So I don't need to post them all individually. The other thing that happens is these accounts are used a whole ton. And if you post individually, it's going to increase the likelihood of you making a mistake. So why not only post a total that we've already made sure equals instead of doing all of those individually? Okay? So when we take a look at line number 5 going across, we have a check mark there because, hey, we took care of it. We don't need to do anything. So we skip right over it. And now we're going to go ahead and go to line number 6 for accounts receivable, Danielle Brasted. No transaction in there yet, so I have to get my month. So we're going to do March. And then we're going to do the 9th. Again, Applia is nice. They just skipped right over the item column for you. Post reference is still going to be 1. Accounts receivable, Danielle Brasted. Kelly, what am I going to be doing with that? 163, excellent. And Marcus, what is my total going to be for this transaction? Why? I agree. Harder when I make you explain the reason why, isn't it? Keep going. What was the previous balance? 0. And what did we just do? We debited 163, so we have to add it. So mathematically, that is our answer. Okay. So you're right. And I get that you're like, because it just is. But I want you to understand why. Because our next transaction is going to be a little different. I like different. Last thing I do is count number 120 back up top. Oh, not the next transaction. I lied. 2 transactions from now. Rent expense is going to be line number 7. Put our date in of March 12th. Post reference 1, and I'm going to debit it for $375. Hannah, what's my balance? What was my balance before the transaction? Before this transaction, 0. And what did I just do because of this transaction? I did what? So if I have a 0 and I have a debit of $375, what's my balance? $375 as a debit. You said credit before. So then we'll go ahead and put 510 back up on the account title. Now this is the one I was excited about too early. We're going to open that back up, Joshua Supply. And guess what? We already have something in Joshua Supply. So this is a little different, which is good because you're like, Mrs. Grassel, I got this. Let me go. So on line 8, the 15th, accounts payable, Joshua Supply. When I open up this ledger, there's already a balance there, so we have to do something a smidge different. The first thing I'm going to do is put the date in. The date it works exactly the same. So I put the 15th. Post reference, still exactly the same. Page 1. The amount of this transaction I'm putting on the ledger, I still get from right here, which is a debit of $50. So I'm going to take this debit of $50 and I'm going to put it right here as 50. What changes, though, is the balance. Because before this, everything we posted had a previous balance of 0. But now, This transaction didn't have a balance of 0. What did it have? $78. Would you agree? We had a $78 credit balance. And what did I just do to it? Debit. So I have a debit and a credit. Do I add or subtract? Subtract. Does it have a debit or credit balance? Why? Credit is bigger than debit. Would you agree? What is the difference between 78 and 50? 28. So the new balance is 28 as a credit. So what you don't do is I don't take this 50 and put it here as a debit. That's not the point of a balance column. The point of the balance column is really how much do I have in that account? Does that make sense? So right now I can see I owe accounts payable Joshua Supply $28. But I can also look to see on what date I paid them and how much. That's important to a business. I need to know when I made payments to my vendors. Last step is account number 210 back up top. Let's open up accounts receivable in Danielle Brasted for the line 9. And guess what? Same thing is going to happen on this one. We already have a balance in there, so I have to put the date in there of the 16th. Post reference is 1, still from page 1 of our journal. And I'm going to go through and I am going to have to take my information from my journal, which is this amount right here for accounts receivable Danielle Brasted. Do you see where I'm getting it? This is a credit. This credit goes here on this amount. So this debit and credit column here just is the amount from the journal put there. So I'm going to credit for $100. But hold your horses. I don't just put a credit here of 100. Abby, what do I need to do? So what is my balance going to be? That's awesome. I had a debit balance of 163 and I just credited 100. The difference is 63 as a debit. So what does that tell us? If Danielle calls us in and wants to know how much she owes us, we can tell her $63. Should I ever have a credit balance for Danielle? No. If you ever do, you've made a mistake somewhere. Why? What kind of account is this? It's an asset. What is our normal balance of assets? Debit. So if you somehow did something and had a credit balance for an asset, whoops. Okay. Last thing we do is account number 120 back up top. The last one, Leonard Witowski Capital, or drawing, excuse me. Put the date of March 25th, post reference is 1, and I'm debiting it for 1,000. It had a previous 0 balance, so it has a new balance of 320. I'm purposely going to make a mistake. Okay, I'm going to put in 100 here. Okay. Now, I'm going to go ahead and check answer. I'm going to close this. I'm going to check answer. And you can see right here that I don't have a perfect green circle. Super sad face. But notice, do I see any red X's? No. What does that mean? Okay, everything is fine in my journal, so I'm going to click on this drop-down menu for here. Do I see any red X's? No, the only way you're going to see those red X's is if you actually look at each account and then find it from here. Do you see how that's a little bit harder to see? So I know I made the mistake in drawing, so when I open up drawing, here's going to be the balance because I forgot a 0. And then it turns into a green X. Go ahead and work on your own. See how you do on that for going through and completing. I am not here tomorrow. While I'm gone tomorrow, you will have a video that you will need to watch. Don't try to do it without my video. If you have headset, bring in your headset so you can listen to it. The video will be posted on Applia for you to listen to and then complete the assignments. The work together and on your own will be graded, okay, because I'm not going to be here and I want to make sure that you get those completed. You will have work together 4-3 and 4-4 to do tomorrow in class. Other assignments will also be turned on for you during class period.